Hello, everyone. We are so excited for Life on Purpose Live today. We have a great author, speaker, Karen Ellison, coming with us from Knoxville, Tennessee. And I'm coming from Panama City. So we are spanning the globe to bring you a message today. Karen is the founder of Deeper Still Ministries. She's going to tell you about her book about the abortion wounded and how her purpose in life is to see that everyone is healed. And so, Karen, we're so glad to have you.
Thank you, Beth. It's great to be here. Love an opportunity to share with your people.
Well, thank you so much. And I do know that you and I crossed paths years ago at a same church in Knoxville. And I know we met, but I have followed your ministry for a long time, and I just love what you're doing. And so, tell us a bit about your purpose, which we know is reaching women and men, which is a big deal, about the topic of abortion. Tell us about how you came about this.
Yeah, well, back in the time when I had my abortion, I just turned 22 years old, and I was just kind of coming out of college. And I was a Christian at the time, and I mean a Christian with conviction. I wasn't just like lukewarm in that way, but I certainly had blinders, and I was operating in some deception. Ended up with this man that I thought we were going to be married and married before God and all that, but really it just turned out when you open the door to sin, it makes you vulnerable to other doors. And I wasn't in the right kind of community where I was willing to bring other people into my struggle that I was at. And so, so you just learn that, the Lord has the body, has community for a reason.
Yes.
Pull us out from if we're getting caught in the undertow, and all that. I didn't have that. And so I was really vulnerable for this path I was kind of being led down. And the other thing I think was a factor for me anyway at that point is it's not really till you're in a crisis that your insecurities come to the surface.
Yes.
So my insecurity that I really identified that I didn't know was there was how much I had a fear of rejection. So my fear that my boyfriend at the time would abandon me or reject me in that way, that became a greater stronghold or a greater fear than my conviction that if I'm pregnant, that means there's a baby involved here. So, I mean, I had that belief in my head, but the thing that was really crushing for me was that I didn't have the character or the wherewithal to stand up for what I believed, to stand for my convictions. But I gave into fear of abandonment, fear of rejection. What are people going to think? There's pride to how I'm going to disappoint my family. Like all those things, like, looking back on it, those seem so superficial, and they are. I mean, they're real in that you feel them, but they are superficial in terms of what's really important in life. And so, but anyway, so I feel like in my abortion experience, I consented to it. It wasn't like I thought it, I wanted it. It was sort of like, okay, I'll do this. That kind of a thing. And so, part of what I really wrestled with on the other side of that was, when you do something against your own convictions, like I wasn't true to myself. I wasn't true to, I felt like I really disappointed the Lord. So that was just really tough. So the enemy battered me with that for a long time, or I let him do that. I let him do that with me for a long time. And then I kind of went silent. I kind of went silent, meaning, I was someone who could talk pretty freely about even just like theology stuff or current events on things or, political. I mean, and all of a sudden I felt like I got gagged and silenced. That's really what happened to me, because I felt like if I begin to speak out about this, then the enemy's lie to me, which I believed was, well, then you'll be even more of a hypocrite. So do you really want to do that too? Do you want to make it worse by being out there and you're not really authentic, you're hypocrite? So that just silenced me for a long time. And I just kind of figured, you know what? I do believe God will forgive me. So, I mean, I did have that belief. God will forgive me, but I'm just going to go into the background. I'm going to shrink away. I'm not going to cause any trouble, and I'll just be a good church girl. And yeah, so I basically believe that I believe God would forgive me, but I believe I forfeited the call of God on my life.
Wow. Do you think that, in your rationale and you're thinking, I know God will forgive me, were you unforgiving of yourself?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like, it's that thing, like you can believe something in your head, but do you really believe it in your heart? Do you really believe it? Like, is that your emotional truth? Is that
Yeah.
not just your spiritual truth? Because even if you say you believe something, but you don't act like you do, you really don't. There's a war going on inside you. So yeah, no, that really took me. I had to go through some stuff to really get to that place where it became real for me. And that's every woman and every man's struggle who has an abortion wounded heart. Uh, and especially for Christians, then that's probably the number one thing Christians will say. They'll say, I believe God's forgiven me. I just can't forgive myself. And
Yeah.
in addition to that, the other thing that I think is really a big issue, especially for Christians, is they believe that, well, let me put it this way, forgiveness and healing are two different things. And people have a strong belief that if I'm forgiven, I'm healed.
Right.
And so their thing is like, well, why do I need to go through healing? Like, I'm forgiven. Why do you want me to go to this retreat? I'm forgiven. But at the same time, they're not free. They can't really talk about their story. They don't want to deal with it. They don't want to acknowledge, like, they don't really want to have to face it. Really was my children. Really were babies. These really were people. Like, you don't want to go to any of those places. You just want to say, I'm forgiven. Why talk about it?
Mm-hmm.
That's such an indication that you're not healed. You're not free. You're not living in light. You're living in a bondage of secrecy and shame somewhere down there. And or why are you so defensive about it?
And what do you think to someone who has this deep, dark secret, which I did for a long time? What do you think? How does that manifest itself in daily living? I mean, how do you recognize I'm not free?
Uh-huh. Well, I think one of the ways I would say how I was, um, you really like your life. Like, first of all, you have a secret to keep.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I can remember for myself, I didn't used to have secrets to keep. Like, I had a pretty normal life, but all of a sudden, when I crossed that line, and first of all, it was sexual sin line, and then the second line became abortion. I had secrets to keep, and when you have
Mm-hmm.
secrets to keep, you don't tell people. And when you
Right.
don't tell people, even though you're trying to hide it on the outside so that people, don't pick up on it or get a vibe about it or whatever, but really, what it becomes, your life comes about managing. You manage your image, you manage what you're going to talk about. If the subject comes up in your Bible study, if the subject comes up in your small group, you manage, you forethink. If that subject comes up, what am I going to say? How am I
Mm-hmm.
going to say it? Or if you're in a conversation, all of a sudden the subject comes up, you find a way to exit the conversation, or you go do something else. You find a way, you're managing. Managing
Mm-hmm.
takes a lot of emotional toll on you. It takes a lot of emotional energy. It wears you out. And so you're kind of like, you're always feeling like you're having to couch something, plan ahead for something, manage.
Yeah. So I think the numbers are 1 in 4 women have had abortions. Is that correct?
Yes. Now, different statistics will say kind of different things, but it's 1 in 3, 1 in 4. But among Christians, even, it's like around 70% American women who have abortions at least self-identify as Christian. Now, that can mean a lot of different things, but still, if you even just think culturally, why culturally in a nation that you consider yourself a Christian, why is that number not that much different from the world? Like, why
Yeah.
is there not a difference there? Like, what have we as Christians, or we call ourselves Christians, what does that really mean to us? And what is our conviction about abortion? And so one of the things that I believe is, I know I'm kind of probably jumping ahead here, Beth, if you don't want to talk about this yet, but
No, I do.
just in the church, like,
Yes.
one of the things about our church, I'm talking about the bigger church here. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, we've got to start with a theology of life.
Mm-hmm.
And in many churches, they don't even consider that like something to talk about or something to teach about. Like you might have a discipleship program when someone first becomes a Christian. Okay, so you have to be discipled in all these areas. And a lot of times in those curriculums, there's nothing about the sanctity of human life. There's nothing about what it is to be made in the image of God. And so therefore, human life is different from animal life. It's different from environmental things. And we are special. We're made in God's image. And if you don't have a theology of life, then you don't understand the value of life. And if you don't understand the value of life, and then when it's in competition with some other thing, like it is in many other cultures, like we actually have an outreach to the Chinese in China and Chinese, and they're so grow up in a culture that is, if you're not an asset to our culture, you're a liability. So in other words, human life is not valued. Well, that's the same thing here. If we don't understand a theology for unborn life, then we're not going to value it as the same way that God values it. And so I think as a church, we've really added to the population of Christians having abortions because they think it's no big deal. They think this is just a surgical procedure. Most people view abortion as a surgical procedure or a chemical procedure now, but a surgical, and that's the end of it.
Mm-hmm.
They don't see it as so I say abortion is first a spiritual issue. It's a spiritual issue of the taking of innocent human life. That's what it is. And until that gets atoned for spiritually, you're never going to heal emotionally or even physically for that matter. So
And you think
go ahead.
Well, I mean, you think in a church setting, if people knew that's 1 in 4 women, and we've had someone, Stephanie just said, I can't believe this is, the numbers are that high. Why is it not addressed from the pulpit?
Okay, so I think there's reasons why it's not addressed. One, like I said, we haven't really, as and even in seminaries or where pastors are trained, do they even talk about, first of all, the sanctity of human life and being made in God's image, and what does that really mean practically for the people in your congregation? And if you know that the statistics are the very thing you just said, you have a lot of women or men in your congregation, and even if they haven't personally had an abortion, maybe their mother, maybe their aunt, maybe their cousin. I mean, somewhere in everyone's family, so you don't have to go far until you cover it. And so I think as pastors, and then there's this whole division between like the male-female thing. So the accusation against the church or against pastors have always been, look, this is a women's issue. You don't have any say in this matter. What do you even know about it? And if it comes from a pastor, then it's like, I think he's been so accused of anything you say is going to be turned against you. And that's true. A lot of times that's true. No matter what kind of position someone's not going to be happy with you. And so a pastor is faced with, is this a battle we're going to choose to get into? Well, I think in some ways, you choose your battles, but for the culture that we live in, and 61 million children have been aborted in the last 47 years. Well, this is the battle you better fight, because we're going to all stand before Jesus and why did we not fight this battle? Yeah. And I do believe it's battle. So for one thing, I think we have to empower our pastors and our elder boards to say, we as women, I think, need to come to them and say, we need to hear from you.
Yeah.
We don't need, no one wants condemnation. No, condemnation is not of Jesus. But you have to give people the truth, and then you have to give them compassion and give the compassion truth. One of my experiences, just as an example, after I had my abortion, a couple months later, I went to actually talk to a pastor. My mother went with me, and she really thought that could help me and help her and all that. And so we went to out of town somewhere, went to some pastor we didn't know.
So you could hide.
So we could hide, exactly. Yeah. So why, this is not anyone who's invested in us. There's just someone. And, this pastor, I will say of him that even though he was very compassionate toward me, so he didn't condemn me in any way, but only the thing that he really only said to me was, he just kind of said, Karen, you're young, and you've been through something really hard, and you have your whole life ahead of you. Maybe you shouldn't be so hard on yourself. That's basically what he said to me. And I was kind of shocked, because I didn't expect that response. But, there was nothing about even though he was kind, he did not discern my need. My
Right.
need was so, like, I had such a weight on my shoulders. I had such a weight and so much self-condemnation and guilt. What I needed to hear him say was the blood of Jesus Christ and what he did on the cross is greater than your sin.
Yeah.
It's greater than what you feel, and that can be removed from you. And so that and so it's like he didn't help me because I think he was afraid of hurting me. But
Yeah.
really, and again, you need to be kind. You can't be harsh, and you have to be, you know, but you have to. It's the truth that sets us free. So we need the truth, and we need the grace and love and kindness of a father.
Yeah.
And of our pastor. But then, secondly, I think the thing I would say about our churches is, we hear a lot about the culture of life, which I love that phrase. I love what that is. We all have heard that phrase now for a couple decades that we need to develop a culture of life. Well, yes, we do. But in addition to that, it doesn't stop there. In the church, we have to develop a culture of healing. And I can tell you that when I go into a church and speak, I can tell if there is a culture of healing in this church. Because if there is a culture of healing, then people, they already have a culture established that you can bring your sin to the light and no one's going to condemn you. You
Mm-hmm.
can come out in the open and we're going to embrace you. We're going to pray with you. We're going to work you through this. That's an entirely different, like I can go to churches and if they have a culture of life and like say after you speak or something, people will come flocking to you to talk.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm in a church where that has not been developed, people run from me.
Wow.
Isn't that funny? You can go to church, they're either going to come to you or they're going to run from you. And it's
Yeah.
all about what kind of culture has this church developed? And can people come into the light with their sin and know that they're not going to be condemned, but they're going to actually help you get free from this.
And I think that's incredible because the culture is created, and I think that's a great analogy is that you create a culture of healing, and you're right. There's not a lot of that, but you have an emotional attachment to this topic, but you also have a professional experience that goes back decades.
Mm-hmm.
So, which started with your emotional need for healing, but what have you learned from being in crisis pregnancy centers with care.net about the statistical data of this hurts women? This isn't just a choice.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And men.
Right. And again, I think what the world or academia or whatever, what they want you to perceive is the only risk involved in an abortion is a minimal risk physically. Like there are physical complications and they have to at least admit that there are physical complications, that you can do yourself a lot of damage and women, you can die. I mean, there's all kinds of, but there's very little, as the years go on that the academia is having to like start to concede that, women actually do have some emotional affects. But like, I know that in the early years of the pregnancy center that I worked at, it was, all that data coming out at that point, it was all about, this is just your hormones. After you had an abortion, your hormones get all mixed up. So therefore, it's going to take a little bit of time to recover, but don't worry, honey, you'll get over it. It's a little bit like postpartum. So once your hormones are back in line, it'll be fine. And it's not fine. And the abortion clinic is never going to do follow-up with you. Or if you call, if women call them back, like, hey, I'm not sleeping at nights and I'm all that, like, well, maybe you need to go see a counselor. I mean, they don't want to deal with you. It's like,
Mm-hmm. Right.
But we, and part of the problem too is like when I said about, you're kind of gagged in silence. Women and men have all kinds of stuff going on inside them, but they don't know who to tell it to. Like, first of all, who do we even say this to? Who wants to even hear it? I might be brave enough to tell you the fact that I had an abortion, but I'm not going to really tell you how that's affected me or what's going on inside of me unless I deeply trust you. So the thing that is amazing to us is like when people come to our retreats, and that's what we do. We do weekend healing retreats for abortion wounded hearts, both men and women. But we have an intake form that people fill out. And on this intake form, we're asking them, what do you emotionally experience in your life? And so we probably have 30 things listed that are possibilities. And most people and sometimes how they fill it out reflects a little bit on their sense of denial or what they're in touch with. But most, we have people that fill out, that circle every single one of those or half of those. And so, and part of that, filling that out even, is just painful for people. It's like, wow, well, now that you put it right in front of me and now that I'm really looking at it, and even the purpose of that intake form is to help you see, okay, I really am experiencing that. And I really am experiencing that. And I'm really, wow, maybe I really maybe there's a lot more going on than I'm wanting to admit to myself.
Mm-hmm.
So when you come to a retreat, like, we really just try to practice, Bible 101, Christianity 101, bring the hidden things into the light. You've got to tell your story. You've got to bring what you've kept and managed for years. You've got to bring it to the light. And so we have women and men tell their story. Like, what is your abortion story? And most people have never told, they may have told the fact to somebody, but they've never told the story. What did you actually experience? And what are you experiencing now? How has that affected your relationships? Statistically, I mean, I don't have an exact statistic, but it's high. That the biggest influencer for women who have abortions is the man involved. And so when you just think the power of a man's opinion or his support or lack of support in her decision. I know that was clearly my story. My boyfriend at the time was the main influencer for me, that I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. And so on the other hand, if you think about a man's perspective, they are either in the category of, she had an abortion without his knowledge, or even if he did know it, she did it anyway and didn't really care what he thought. Mm-hmm. Or he emotionally, spiritually, physically controlled her, forced her to have an abortion, or he took the passive route of said, whatever you want to do, I'm fine with. I'll just support you, which is very passive. There's nothing in that. There's nothing in that says, I'm going to fight for you and I'm going to fight for our child. Mm-hmm. It's a passive way, but you feel like you can put it off on her. Now, there's also the fact that the whole women's kind of movement told men that you have no dog in this fight. Mm-hmm. We told men for all these years, you have no voice in this. And so they backed. So they're kind of like, okay, they backed off. So they like welcomed the passivity of it, And so men, when they come to our retreats and so forth, they are, the kind of guilt that they carry is not only that they know that there's blood on their hands of their children, but they're like, I allowed myself to be emasculated. I didn't lead. I didn't protect. I didn't promise her anything. In fact, I broke all my promises. I abandoned her. They're living with that. Everything that makes up me being a man or a man of, I was none of those things. I miserably felt like, how do I even, so they have a real low view of themselves. Like, they're not the hero. They're not the hero they wanted to be.
Yeah.
And so they're bringing all that in. And the other thing that we've heard from men at our retreats, that's one of the reasons why I believe the Lord, at some point, we used to do just all women's retreats. And then the Lord really began to say, no, you need to bring my sons to this retreat. They need to hear each other in this. And so that was like a big risk, but it's like, okay, Lord, if you're saying to do this, well, it turned out to be like the best thing. It's like the Lord is doing so much healing between men and women. And a lot of times the men will say to us, we never knew how much we hurt you. We never knew how much we hurt you. And the reason they never knew, because no one talks about it. After you don't talk about it. Even if you did it together, even if you got married, you do not talk about it. You have this silent pain, shame, guilt. And so this, when you, like, if you're really going to step in to get healing, you've got to open up. You've got to bring it out. You've got to get it out there. And Jesus will absolutely meet you. I can tell you how strongly he'll meet you if you will let him in and let him do this surgery. You'll do it. He'll do it, and you'll be set free.
And I wonder how many times you've heard people say, I wish I had done this years ago.
Totally. Statistically, the age group of women that come to our retreats the most are women in their 50s. Yeah. It goes women in their 50s and 60s. And then it's 40s, 30s, 70s.
Wow.
And so it's like, and that's exactly what they say. There's like, why did I wait so long? I mean, I haven't even told my husband this, and we've been
Yeah.
married for 30 years.
Yeah.
It's like, and I think part of it is you're more reflective. Your life is not as busy as it used to be. You have grandchildren that are now coming, and you're like, what kind of legacy would I want to leave? And I don't want to tell them because I'm kind of on a pedestal in their eyes. But so you just, all that bondage, you just keep it inside. But, you don't have to wait till you're on your deathbed before you get a healing for this. Like the Lord, like we say, the Lord doesn't just heal you from something, he heals you to something. So like
Mm-hmm.
the whole thing, Beth, that you're about, like the purpose, like a purpose, what's your purpose in life? Well, the Lord, if you still have breath, God has something for you to do. Like you're still like, get healed so you can get on with it. The
Yeah.
Lord wants to heal you because he has, if you would have told me, like back when I was in my 20s, in a million years, I would have never viewed myself as what I'm doing today because
Yeah.
I forfeited all that.
Yeah.
But when I got healed, then the Lord could say, okay, here's what I want you to walk in.
Yeah. So tell us and tell everybody about the retreats, your book. I mean, you have the resources. You have everything anyone would need to
Yes.
take that initial step, and a community to step into. So somebody listening now or somebody who watches later, how safe is it and how complete is what you offer for them
Mhm.
to have that freedom?
Yeah. Well, the Lord has a healing journey tailor made for every person. And
Mhm.
so you might have several pre-steps before you get in. He just, he knows how to do it. So you just
Yeah.
like trust him. But
Yeah.
if you give him your yes, really, if you give him your yes, he will lead you and you can trust him. And it's not that there's not going to be pain involved, but he's like, he doesn't like get you around the pain, you go through the pain. So,
Mhm.
and there's another side to it. There's freedom and healing on the other side. We offer these weekend retreats. They're free of charge. So like, why not come? You have
Yeah.
nothing to lose but your bondages. And
Mhm.
so, even though we're in Knoxville, Tennessee, and this is kind of our hub, so to speak, but our mission is to multiply these chapters. So we have chapters around the country. So we have about 23 right now, but we would love to have chapters in every state, but we're just kind of getting that going. And you can get on our website and see if we're in your state or just travel to where one is right now. But our website is godeeperstill.org. Because that's really the invitation. Go deeper still.
Deeper still.
That's how you can do it. But we also have, like I said, for men and women as well. And so, but part of when people, if they're really afraid to like take that first step to go to retreat, that's one of the reasons why I wrote this book. I wrote this book, Healing the Hurt That Won't Heal. And one of the reasons it's freedom for the abortion wounded and help for the church. They fear, like, can you read a book? Well, you at least start by reading a book, because
Yeah.
some things we put in there that we do at the retreat, but not everything. And that can kind of help people feel like, okay, I've read that much. I think these people are safe. So I'm willing to now call. And when we do our retreats, we do a team approach. So it's not like just me or one facilitator there kind of facilitate. We have a whole team of people, and these people are amazing. And we've trained them up, and half of the team members usually are post-abortive themselves. So they've already been through their healing. But the other half of them, they haven't had abortions, but they've had other things in life where they've had to trust God for healing.
Mhm.
And I think if you're an abortion wounded woman or man, you can believe that someone else who's had an abortion will probably be for you or can have compassion on you, but you don't necessarily believe that other Christians out there that haven't had an abortion wouldn't judge you. But we're saying we have both on our team, so you need to know that no matter who you are, the body of Christ is surrounding you, and we are going to help you through this.
That is an excellent point to have both there. And then let's close on this, and we have to wrap up. But people are watching the pro-life dilemma play out in the nation. We had a pro-life agenda before, and now it's not. I mean, it's definitely a lot looser. What can people do that want to see abortion reduced, eliminated? Is there anything that everybody that sees this issue and their heart hurts for it, is there anything we can do to help have influence on the nation's direction.
Yeah, that's really good, Beth. And that's a very sobering question. And I'm one of those that believe we need it all. We need everything. We need a political voice. We need a voice in the pulpit. We need education. I'm like, we need it from all areas, all that. So the Lord might call you or gift you in certain ways. But here's what I'm going to say is what I'm going to advocate for. If you were like me and you were gagged in silence because of shame, you were never going to be heard from again. When I got set free and healed, I got my voice. And just think about 61 million abortions. I mean, many in America, many women, about 50% of women who have abortions have had more than one. So, but if the women and the men who are abortion wounded would get healed and they get their voice back, they will speak and
Yes.
tell the truth. And then abortion can be overturned overnight, really.
Yeah.
If the silent, gagged church would stand up and the abortion wounded would get healed, we would be a roar like this world has never heard. And I do believe that's why God is raising up post-abortion ministries, because he wants the holy roar of the abortion wounded to come out. Like he said, like one of our scriptures is in Revelation 17 or 19, I think it's 19, about he's preparing the bride. He's preparing the bride for his return. We are helping to prepare the bride so she can wear that white robe, that white, and feel like she's blameless before her God. And we are helping the bride get ready for his return.
I love that. That's great. And I agree that we change the world one story at a time, and whatever your story is, share it with one person and then share it with others, and start with godeeperstill.org, right? You have all the resources. And so thank you so much for being here. I think this is a tough topic, but it's one that we've got to talk more about, not less about. And thank you for the years that you've put into doing this, and for sharing your story with us today.
Amen. Thank you, Beth. Thank you for letting us have a voice so that we can empower other women and men with their voice.
Amen. And we'll come back around and do this some more, and be sure and let us know when you have retreats, and we'll post them.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Talk to you soon. Thank you guys for watching.